Pakistan heroes, Mr. Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, despite facing a great loss, what he has embodied is grace, and his tireless, consistent, and non-violent, most importantly, non-violent campaign is a material of legend. So it's a real honor. I'll be talking about three fundamental ideas. Number one, the South Asian region in general, but even the broader region, is passing through a period of contention. When we talk about contention in political science, we talk about abnormal politics. So election would be normal politics, but people pouring on the streets, fighting for their rights would be abnormal politics. So there is an episode of contention that is unfolding in the region, as exemplified by the events of Sri Lanka 2 months ago. But one region that is particularly eventful. When I say eventful, it means there are many significant events happening, and they're coming thick and fast. So their intensity and frequency compared to the national political structures and their capacities, they outweigh. And when that happens, then that is a recipe for changes. But what kind of changes, for good or worse, is what I'm going to discuss. The third and final point is that these events and any changes in the normal politics, they have profound implications for the rights of all groups, but particularly marginalized groups. So then I'm going to talk about that. I think it's important to talk about at least some events of the past year. The withdrawal of the international forces, spearheaded by the US from Afghanistan, and the swift overtake of power by the Taliban in Afghanistan was a major event that had ripple effects on other countries in the region. The removal of Imran Khan from power through democratic process, and then his subsequent response to his removal, both in terms of grassroots mobilization and also playing figures within the army against each other, has had profound implications on the politics in Pakistan. The resurgence of TTP, since I've already talked about that, and the deteriorated security situation in the tribal areas and in the Pashtun belt in general has been a significant event. And then counter-mobilizations to TTP's presence. So people coming on the street demanding peace and demanding to know what was going on behind the closed doors between the Pakistani army and TTP when they were negotiating with each other in Kabul, has been another significant event. So people are aware that things can go wrong and we have to take action and take it now. The sustained attacks in Afghanistan by ISIS. One of the major failures of the Taliban this time around, and I've done an article on this recently, in the 90s, Taliban prided themselves at the fact that they had created this monster, a leviathan, and no one could challenge their writ where they ruled. They can no longer claim that. And one of the main reasons is the presence of Daesh or ISIS in Afghanistan. And then, at the same time, despite commitments by Taliban, their failure to prevent attacks from Afghanistan into neighboring countries, particularly in Pakistan and Central Asia. At the same time, their own soldiers fighting with security forces of these countries. There have been several skirmishes on the borders. The killing of Al-Qaeda leader in Kabul in a drone attack, allegedly, was another significant event, and also a turning point in the relationship between the Western world and the Taliban, a huge dent in any further developments there. Migration of tens of thousands of Afghans, particularly young Afghans, to the countries in the region, but also to the West. And the recent major flooding in Pakistan that has rendered millions of people homeless. And finally, the Xinjiang report of gross human rights violation by the Chinese state against its Muslim population. What is important here is that these events, they take a toll on national political structures. So even if we call Taliban's government not a representative government, but that is a national political structure that is in power right now. In Pakistan, obviously it's a different story, but the army itself is the driving force in Pakistani politics. So it has taken a toll on that. What kind of implications it will have is a totally different matter. And I'd like to talk about that at some point. What we know from the literature on social movements, protests, insurgencies in these kind of events is that there's always fracturing. And these fractures, these crises, they create opportunities. Anyone in the position to avail these opportunities as effectively as they can will have the upper hand in the future. And that comes down, and I see some faces from Pashtun Tahfuz movement here, to movements like Pashtun Tahfuz movement, how they can become the beacons of human rights in the region. Otherwise, Taliban and other terrorist outfits will use these opportunities for their own advantage. At the same time, the national governments will be faced with numerous challenges. I'll give you some examples. Some of the names of the mobilizations that are taking place right now in Pakistan. Obviously, we know Imran Khan and his PTI are mobilizing massively against the government. They are also criticizing the government, thanks to Manzoor Pashtun and PTM. Finally, people have come out openly criticizing the army. Then you have PTM, and there's renewed impetus of PTM in the forms of these peace protests. You have TTP, you have the Baloch, both violent and non-violent. The unfair thing about the Baloch campaign is that everybody is fixated on the violent flank, but that's not the whole story. They have an effective, massive, non-violent flank, spearheaded by Muammar Qadir. A slew of terrorist groups, those who have been squeezed in Afghanistan, the Uzbeks, the Chinese, the Tajiks, they are now trying to make some space for themselves. Women protesting in Afghanistan have made a lot and significantly dented Taliban's ability to govern. You have the National Resistance Force in the northeast of the country that has, despite Taliban's immense investment, they have sustained their campaign. And obviously you have the ISIS and a number of other jihadi groups present in the country. So this combination between events such as the flooding in Pakistan and then having so many mobilizations, this either takes the region into another crisis or creates opportunities for groups defending human rights to finally have a better say in the politics in that region. I think it's best exemplified by the example of the 2005 earthquake in Pakistan. When General Musharraf, the dictator back then, was in power, the biggest challenge he had was to deal with the lawyers' movement. And at one point, then several political parties, including Imran Khan, they also got together with the lawyers to campaign against Musharraf's removal. But the catalyst came in 2005, when there was an earthquake in the north of Pakistan. More than 100,000 people, 200,000 people were killed. And the response of the government was desperate. And then organizations, so-called civil society organizations, stepped in, even some religious extremist organizations such as Al-Khidmat, Daud, and they took the mantle of the government and they delivered services. And that became a catalyst for the eventual downfall of Musharraf in 2007. What we are seeing right now in terms of flooding in Pakistan, and my advice to human rights defenders would be to do two things. Number one, to study the situation as acutely as possible and as urgently as possible right now, and then identify and try to use the opportunities that it is created in Pakistan. I would end with this, that I would have never thought in my wildest dreams a few years back that I would have a human rights movement present in the UN defending its rights in the form of Pashtun Tahfuz movement. So it's a real honor. Thank you so much.